This meeting is being recorded.
Hey everyone, welcome to Voice Global and in our talk on Inside Custom Voice Assistants. We're going to unpack sort of what a custom enterprise voice assistant is and even walk through some really cool use cases. By way of introduction, I'm Alex Dunn. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Voicify. I've been working in the custom voice assistant space for years now and speaking on it as well. And today I'm going to be sort of unpacking really what goes into an assistant, when to think about doing it, what you can really get out of it. As someone who could be building an assistant for your own brand. And then I'm also excited to be joined by Sanket. So Sanket, why don't you give your own sort of introduction here before we jump in?
Sure, thanks Alex. I'm Sanket, been also working in the voice space since 2017. Very passionate about voice assistants and how we can use them in interesting use cases, specifically in the areas of electromobility. Right, back to you, Alex.
Cool. So custom voice assistants are interesting. They sort of sit in the conversational AI ecosystem in a unique spot. I sort of put this little visual together to show you all the different places where conversational AI exists in the enterprise ecosystem. Doing things like IVR and call center deflection is important, and custom assistants can even fit there too. There's also, over the last 15 or so years, been a big wave of chatbots making their way into continuing to do things like call center deflection and custom support and trying to offset that need for a physical agent. And then super far on the right over here, there's also the voice assistants that we know and love, or maybe don't love, between platforms like Alexa, Google Assistant, Bixby, Siri, and within those, the individual voice apps or applications, skills, actions, capsules that developers can build. And custom voice assistants sort of live somewhere in between, where you get all the value of what you can do with a custom IVR experience or a chatbot interface, but all the power of what comes from the right side with building a voice assistant that users can get to and access very quickly from anywhere. But by building a custom assistant, you get a whole lot more out of it as the builder and a lot more flexibility to create those experiences that your users will love. Now, what sort of goes into a custom assistant is a lot more, right? It's not just a chatbot where you've got a simple interface and a text box, and it's also not an existing platform where someone's already solved the speech recognition and the text to speech. So when you're building your own custom voice assistant, you have to cover all the different pieces, from building a custom wake word to implementing automatic speech recognition, taking that speech recognition and feeding it into natural language understanding and processing, which takes more data like named entities, intents, and slots and feeds them to a decision engine, do personalization based off the user, figure out what you should say back based off what they said, or if you should say anything at all, do text-to-speech processing from the text that you've resolved or the SSML that you've resolved, and then apply different media and effects, which we'll get into later, and distribute that assistant to other channels, right? You're not going to be able to just create an assistant and have it exist on someone else's smart speaker. You have to go through the effort of making sure that it exists in your mobile app, in your website, on your own custom hardware, and everything in between. And then underneath all that, the most important step from building it is actually continuing to develop it, understanding what users are doing, what's working, what's not, what they expect. Being able to analyze that, continue to train things like your speech recognition, your NLP, your decision engine, and feed those reports back and ingest that information and sort of marry it up with existing data too. One of the really cool things about doing this at the custom assistant level is you get far more access to all that information than you do if you're building on a platform like Alexa or Google Assistant, or if you're just building a simple chatbot. We'll get into all the different things that you can sort of extract as information and context and tools that you can use to make your assistant smarter and in the end make your user's experience even better. We also have our visual conversation design and management interface. So how do we actually build all of the things that go into these little buckets? And then how do we also scale that in order to make this a platform that can be shipped into all these different channels and that can be developed over time by making it easier on ourselves as developers too. So what I also want to get into here is not just, what custom assistants are, but when you really should be thinking about building one and using one and when it's not the right place. So I sort of broke up this good and bad. These aren't, hard lines of if I want to do this thing, I should never build a custom assistant, or I should only do it if it's on this good side. But these are just the ways that I like to think about what goes into the decision of should we be thinking about a custom assistant for these use cases. So on the good side, the benefits are really that you get to meet users where they already are with more convenience. If they are in a mobile app all the time, that you have an experience where someone goes there, make it a little bit easier for them to get to that deeper information, make information access faster within those different places where they already are, create more accessible experiences by offering new avenues and new channels to interact with your brand, and create that brand consistency in a more ambient way by having that assistant be available on all these different platforms where you meet the user. The sort of things that I like to think to avoid when it comes to a custom assistant is experiences that are voice only. Unless you're specifically building for a device that is just a speaker and a microphone, taking the user away from their existing modality, like their app or their website, can be a dangerous thing for the user in terms of their trust in your brand, which takes me to the sort of second points of risking damaging the user's trust. If you're in a position where asking the user for their microphone, expecting them to be able to talk to you is something that they're not going to be a fan of, then a custom voice assistant may be a risky endeavor, because you have that risk of breaking their trust that they're developing with you as a brand. And then lastly, if you're doing something that takes longer to do with voice, you're kind of missing the point. So it's sort of the antithesis of making information access faster by making tasks longer, by forcing it through a long conversation. So let's dig into these. I sort of group these up together for you all. And this first one I want to talk about is meeting users where they are with more convenience while creating that more ambient brand experience. And what it comes down to when you're building a voice assistant is distributing it to the places where they already are. What we do at Voicify is enable you to do just that. You can create a single assistant and deploy it even to an Alexa skill in Google Action, but also embed it in a native mobile app, put it on a website, put it in a virtual reality or augmented reality place, do it in the infotainment systems of cars, embed it in drive-through systems. We sort of like to think of it like there's an opportunity for your assistant to exist anywhere where there is a speaker and a microphone and or a screen. The biggest thing to think about here, though, is where should you be putting your assistant? Because not everyone has all these channels. The biggest benefit, like I mentioned before, is meeting the users where they already are. If you have that mobile app where they frequently go to, or if you have a website or a web portal that they go to, meet them there. If you're trying to create a brand new experience in the metaverse or in augmented reality, you can create those conveniences for the user by integrating it with your voice assistant, or really integrating your voice assistant into that experience. But it's not to say that you need to cover all of these use cases. It's really to show that you can really get to the user where they are just with more convenience. And when you do that, at all those existing touch points that you have with your users, you create that ambient brand experience. So here's a couple examples I wanted to show with being able to put an assistant on a website. This is one with Home Depot. You'll notice that it's not taking the user away from their experience. In this case, I've actually already opted into talking to it, right? So it's popped up in the bottom right for me, and I'm starting to speak to it. I'm looking for a new washer. It doesn't get in my way. It's creating an ambient experience where it can come up, come down, and do something for me on the fly. Or some of these pictures of a native voice assistant embedded in a mobile version of our own Voicify CMS. So being able to do things more frequently, more quickly, and in a way where it's not going to interrupt their flow, but it's where they already are if they're already sort of in the Voicify platform. The next sort of points are making those information features and utility faster, more accessible. This alone has sort of been a value prop of things, just generally speaking, with conversational AI. The downside to some of these approaches, like the ones you're seeing here, is they take the user completely out of the context of what they are doing on these other channels. So having like only the ability to get that information faster if you're in a pure chatbot experience, and not being able to jump right into it from a different platform, which I know Sanket's going to talk about later with how they did that with being able to do it from the car. Or you can have something like Siri, which its whole original purpose was just make information access faster from anywhere. Embedding it directly at the native level of an operating system provides exactly that. A user knows that they can just get to it and get to that information faster. But you don't own an operating system, or maybe you do, in which case, great. But presumably you don't, but maybe you own an app. Take, for example, this just very beautiful, generic smart home app. It's got all sorts of things going on. It's giving you weather information. It's giving you energy information. It gives you access to your different air conditioners, your heat, your light, your fans. for each room that you have set up. There's a lot that you can do with this application. And there's for each person a different experience when they get in, depending on what devices they have set up. And it's sort of complicated to get into those details without being a power user that knows exactly where to tap as you go through it to find that information. But there's a lot that you can make more convenient and faster here by implementing a voice assistant, which we'll talk about a little bit. For example, if I wanted to do things like jump right to a room and take an action on it, I could just do that with basically 3 or 4 words rather than having to navigate through 3 or 4 screens and know exactly where to tap to do that. The interesting thing about custom voice assistants in these use cases, especially mobile too, is they break this current divide that we see a lot in conversational AI, where the conversational or voice user experience is totally isolated from the rest of the user experience. And custom voice assistants do a great job at bridging that gap without getting in the way. And a big part of that is what we like to call side effects. Conceptually, what a side effect is the ability for the assistant to do something in the application when the user requests it. So take, for example, this very basic flow of any sort of conversational AI, right? User starts a voice request, they said something goes off in the background, maybe that sort of backend side effect that's not apparent to the user. Maybe that's going and getting information or triggering something on your API side. The AI and decision engine does something to process the request, the response is heard, and then maybe if you're doing something like a multi-turn conversation, we open the microphone up again. But what the side effects are is the assistant also telling the client application to do something. So at the same time that they may be hearing a response, something else is going on in the app too. One of the most common ones that we see is just simple page navigation. Don't try to create that new modality of, hey, the user said this, let's show a brand new version of this existing screen. Instead, what a custom assistant can do is get them to that screen that they otherwise would have to tap multiple times to get to, while also then providing that response and overview. That's that true convenience and information faster. So for example, going back to our beautiful little smart home app, let's say we're on this home screen, right? We just opened the app and I say, hey, assistant, show me how the bedroom looks, because I want to know what's going on in the bedroom, what devices are on, what the temperature is. Instead of just giving me some overview or some full chat page in this use case, I could take the user to the bedroom page and provide the summary overview with text to speech. But for users that can't hear the text to speech, whether their speakers are off or they're hard of hearing themselves, we still give them the information that they're asking for while using all the existing beautiful UI that we've built. Another one is like kicking off background tasks. So as the response is heard, maybe we need to do something on the client side in the background. Going back here, let's say in a multi-turn conversation, what else can I help with? And the user says, turn the living room temperature up in an hour. Something that's not going to happen right away, but maybe we want to kick off a task to do that after an hour. We can still take them to the page or pull up, some sort of modal here and let them know and give that confirmation like, hey, yeah, in an hour, I got you. We're going to turn the temperature up. Now, I also talked about the ability to ingest more context and more information into your brand and into your own analytics based off of what you can do with those custom voice assistants. And some of the really cool things we get is we get all that voice first context, all the conversational context. So if you have an existing app, one of the things you don't necessarily have is an understanding of how users really want to talk to your brand. And that's what voice first context gets you. If you're building a voice only application, this is basically where it ends. But you get things like their history of their conversation. What have they said previously to the assistant? You get all the NLP data, intent, slots, named entities, sentiment analysis, device capabilities, and everything that's specific to them trying to speak to it. Now, that might be in a mobile app, that might be on the website, and that might be in an embedded device somewhere or even in a VR experience. But there's a lot that you get to unpack from an understanding of how a user is speaking to you. But it doesn't end there. We get to take all that voice context, our big blue ball here, and then add user-specific information. So are they an authenticated user? Can we now take, because they are, all the information about what else they've done outside of the voice assistant, right? What else have they done in my app? What have they done on my website? What did they do when they called into my call center before? And marry up all that information across the board. And then in the case of mobile, or even in some websites, you also get the extra context of things like the current state of the app that they're in. When I said, show me the living room, was I on the home page? Was I already on the living room page? If so, why did I ask that? Was I, somewhere in my settings? Was I lost? Was I trying to navigate around to find the information before I just asked for it? Was I at home when I asked for it, or was I, out and away because I'm using my geolocation? We can do a lot with this information on the voice experience side. We can do things like short circuit a conversation. If we know that they're a user who's frequently asking something, maybe we just give them that information right away rather than making them ask for it again. We can provide more context, more personalized follow-ups. We can track all that information in analytics, pass it back to our own analytics platform and CDPs and CRMs, and then execute the optimal side effects based off that user. So going back to that show me how the bedroom looks use case, it's not just as simple of like a flow of, hey, I asked for that thing, navigate me away and take me to that bedroom. There's a lot more that we can get out of that, both on the backend side as the brand that wants to understand what users are really looking for, so I can build a better user experience over time, but also to just provide the best, fastest experience. So I can pull information like, okay, I know you're signed in, I know who you are. I know that you were on the homepage when you asked. I know that you are currently away from your home address that you have registered in your smart home app. And I also know that bedroom is most commonly asked for in the room. So maybe the next time you pull up the assistant or you even pull up the app, we just take you right to your bedroom page instead of making you navigate all the way there. So the sort of summary version of this is the value of creating a custom voice assistant is to create faster, more accessible and ambient experiences with your brand that your users will love and make them something that they can access everywhere and get more information. Do it faster, do it in a more enjoyable way so that they keep coming back, right? You want to keep building those experiences that keep users happy and doing that at the right place at the right time with a voice assistant that understands them and that helps develop even more trust with your brand is a huge value add that you can bring to your existing experiences. Now that's all just sort of like what the assistants are, what they can do. I want to talk through some of the real examples and I'm going to hand it over to Sanket, who's going to walk through the work that they all did over at Volkswagen on the ID series of cars and their custom assistant.
Right. Thanks, Alex. I'd like to just talk about what we did with Voicify in the context of voice assistants and as an exception this time, not inside the car, but onto the mobile touch points. Electromobility is big for VW, and with our goal to become carbon neutral and also contributing to the global warming topics, we're focusing quite a lot on electromobility. Obviously, vehicles have been traditionally IC, internal combustion, and we're moving towards electromobility. And in the EU5 markets where we have our cars, many of the customers who are buying electric vehicles are buying it for the first time. And with that into perspective, we focused quite a lot on things that we'd like to address or questions that we'd like to address and the modalities in which we could do. I mean, traditionally, we've had FAQs on our websites, which are somewhere deep inside the page tree. And we decided we should put a tool which is easily accessible and accessible all the time to the customers. And that's where we decided to build a speech assistance, voice assistance function inside our vConnect ID app, which is the companion app for the ID vehicles from VW. And to the sake of having these dialogues being updated and hosted easily, that's where we chose to build this with Voicify. I mean, we've been working with voice assistants are not new for VW. We've had a speech assistance function inside the car. They're doing really well. They can control your car. The reason we went with the mobile app was to have a speech function which is readily accessible, that we keep ourselves and do away from the strict controls that are applied and regulations that are applied towards digital assistant systems inside the car in terms of notifications, etc. And also, since apart from the keys, the mobile phone is the thing that travels further most than your vehicle. So going onto the mobile app was actually a natural choice. I'd like to show you what we did specifically. If Alex, you could please go to the next slide. Thank you. We focus on electromobility, like I said, and the things are the MVP use cases that we focused on were finding charging stations, getting the state of charge of the vehicle, and some charging infrastructure and other FAQs that a customer might have. We decided not to go big bang. This is not how Volkswagen works. We go all the way through all markets, all languages, all regions, all vehicles. But this time we decided to take a stepwise approach, and we chose to go on to the app front, focus only on iOS devices, focus on 2 languages, English and German, and only in Germany. This was the plan that we set forth for us in order to measure what is the acceptance over there, for which we have had really good numbers. So I'd like to talk now about what use cases were and how did we integrate inside the app. Alex, would you please go to the next slide? Thanks. Right. So it's a very, you could say, a traditional speech interface, which is what the users are familiar with. That's where we leverage that interface, that type of interface. But we went a step ahead and we said, okay, let's integrate it with the native voice experience that we have. And in this case, it would have been Siri. For us, it was important. What we have observed is that the content which customers ask for varies quite a lot. So for us, it was very important to choose a technology that enables us to flexibly change dialogues and flexibly change our content. The other most important thing was you can have cool chatbots, but most of them are plain with no multimedia, no images or videos for that matter. And it was therefore very important that we complement the text content that we bring in also with such multimedia items. It was again also something that we could do quite well with the Voicify CMS. And finally, we also now want to clutter the customer with a bunch of voice assistant functions that they use. So we said we decided to actually go and integrate it with Siri. What you see here is at an end effect, you can ask Siri to find charging stations close by. It will open up the WeConnect ID app and it will show charging stations. Now, what is the difference over here, right? Usually one point that I'd like to point out over here is you could have found out charging stations directly by going to Google, or you could have said Google Assistant and find charging stations. One of the focuses for a lot of OEMs, especially in the automotive sector, is to build ecosystems around the vehicle and just not focus on the vehicle. And when you're building electric vehicles, you have to have a very solid network of charging stations. By building such an experience, you're now bringing a customer who could have gone outside of your ecosystem and probably would have charged onto a charging station which doesn't belong to your group, and therefore pay more money for the same charging session. When you already have an ecosystem and collaborations, you want to leverage that and provide your customer more benefits or additional benefits of using the charging infrastructure that you have, where the customer also benefits by having discounted charging prices. By doing this, since the customer is now used to already using Siri, instead of going directly to generic charging station results on the internet, you've brought the customer back inside your ecosystem. So that's also one of the biggest powers that you have over there. Going to the next slide, Alex, the same topic here. However, here we focus more on the paranoia, if you allow me to say that, of the customer who adapts the electric vehicle for the first time. For example, we've all driven, our first cars have always been internal combustions, at least for now. Mine was an internal combustion. Many of the people or the younger generation that is going to buy cars there, it's going to be electric. And also for a lot of people who are used to buying or driving or used to driving internal combustion cars, electric vehicles are something new. There's a lot of questions that come around it, like one of the most hilarious ones that came up was, if I drive through the car wash, is it going to explode? It does not, but that's the kind of thing that keeps coming up all the time. And the other thing is, people are paranoid about the range of the electric vehicle. It includes me as well. Like when I was like, okay, when I see WLTP a range of 500 kilometers, and I'm like, whoa, 500 kilometers. My Audi can drive 1,000 kilometers on a full tank, but to be honest, I don't drive 1,000 kilometers in a week. And which, if you look at it the other way around, 500 kilometers is going to cater to your weekly driving needs, if not more. Nevertheless, we still have these questions coming up, and we said, all right, let's give them the tool. Let's give our customers the tool to be able to query the charging state of our car, and we enabled that also over Siri shortcuts. You can sit inside your home on your couch, and you could query the charging status of your electric vehicle parked inside your garage directly over Siri. Like I said about the FAQs, if you go to the next slide, these are the things that we added. And to be honest, with charging stations and state of charge, we got a lot of requests, which was obvious. The most movement and the most dynamic area was on the FAQs. The questions that we were getting kept increasing, and they were to a point that many of such FAQs are open domain questions, if I may say, in regards to electric vehicle. They started falling into the fallback where the voice AI couldn't answer that. We saw that very easily. We get all the backend logs of our conversations that happen over the Voicify app inside our backends, and that enables us to look at this data and analyze it. If you go to the next slide, I can show you what the distribution there was. The pie chart here shows the distribution of topics of all the queries that landed inside the fallback. I mean, fallback is an area where your voice AI is not able to answer that question, or if you trained it so well that it should not answer certain questions. However, in our cases, we've seen that a lot of questions came around software updates, charging cards, charging tariffs, and exporting your charging sessions and the charging history, etc. What we said is, all right, these are topics that we know. I mean, we know what to do with this. There is information about this on different sources. For example, on websites, it's also, we get a lot of calls also in our call centers, and that's where our customer agents are answering these questions over there. And we're like, okay, this is not new. These are not new things. It's just that these questions are there. People are using this new channel that we have built. It's just not there inside the content. But that was not a big problem. We added those questions inside the CMS very easily. It was very flexible for us to add these questions and answers to them, and even more in an interactive manner. For example, step-by-step tutorials. If you go to the next slide, we've seen such questions also coming up into our call centers. What we've seen is people call our service centers, and they have a lot of questions regarding enrollment of the vehicles, regarding specific questions to electric mobility, etc. Said, all right, let's look at these questions as well in complementing to the conversation history that we get from the Voicify application itself. What we did is we looked at this content, we compared it, and we said, okay, are these questions that come in frequently, and can you answer them over an intuitive voice user interface? If that was the case, we said, all right, we integrate that. And one good example of this was with integrating, or how do you add a charging card inside your Reconnect ID app. If you go to the next slide, that's what we did. So we observed that people have been asking about these questions about charging cards all the time inside our Voicify logs. We saw that. We also saw those questions coming up inside the telephone lines on the call center. Said, all right, this is basically a common knowledge. It's step by step, and let's solve this problem. What we did is we took those questions, we took the variations of the customer queries, we added them to Voicify. We used several inherent structures that are offered inside the Voicify platform. For example, contextual responses, etc., in order to build a step-by-step tutorial. Here you can see that we added this functionality in which now a customer can ask, hey, how can I add a charging card inside my app? And then there is a step-by-step tutorial that starts over, helping the customer to do exactly what is needed in order to get their charging cards in there. One of the biggest advantages that I see here is not only can we supplement or complement the dialogues that we've had built inside our voice experience over Voicify, is that we can also extend this to further topics. And to that, I'll come to my next slide. Here, we decided to do something similar, where we it's a topic that we're still working on. A lot of things that we would like to still bring to the ground. But however, we look at using the same voice experience that we've built for the WeConnect ID app, for the voice AI there, and extend it to the telephone lines. We said, hey, why not? If these FAQs are coming in on one channel, they're obviously coming in on the other channel. How about we put this into an intelligent and create an intelligent routing solution wherein we add this voice experience in front of the telephone lines, where a customer calls in, speaks in a natural language and says, hey, look, I cannot enroll my car. We can either give a straightforward answer or route the customer to a specific call center, thereby leveraging the ability of the system to understand what the customer problems are and reducing the queue times. There is at least one of the biggest benefits. We see a lot of customers being frustrated staying inside the queue for a very long time just to find out that they actually chose to call a wrong number. Can get really frustrating. I mean, these are the cases where you can also use an existing experience that you have and extend it to a different touch point and still gain customer value. Quite an exciting response we've had since we've been live. A lot of changes we've done to our content. It was an exciting journey, and we're just looking forward to where all we can extend our already built voice user interface and the voice AI to our further channels. Right. Back to you, Alex.
Cool. That's all we had to share with you all today. Thank you so much for joining us, talking a bit more about what custom voice assistants are, what you should be thinking about when implementing a custom assistant, when they fit and when they don't. And then thank you, Sanket, for sharing with everyone all the things that you all did within the WeConnect ID experience in the mobile app with your custom assistant, and how you're able to extract more information and continue to grow that experience as well to meet your users. So thank you, everyone. And that's it from us.
Thank you.